right now, so if everyone can take their seat, and we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome and roll call. The trustees present are Jennifer Newbold, Vicki McDonald, Corbin Bregstad, Heidi Kendall, Mike Smith, and Marcia Holland, and that constitutes a quorum. And therefore, we'll go ahead to, because it's a special board meeting, we won't say the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll allow for any public comment on non-agenda items at this time. Seeing none, then one of the things which is somewhat missing on here, usually we have get to look at the agenda and ask for any revisions to the order in which we'll deal with the agenda, and somehow that just was left off this meeting, but I'll make a suggestion that we move immediately to the two budget issues that we're dealing with, because we're not sure how long we can keep trustees who are participating by telephone on the line. So if the trustees have no objection to moving to C6, and then C7, and then if we get time, we'll go to B2 about early admissions. Everything else on the agenda can be continued to the next regular board meeting or even the board meeting in September. Is that okay with all trustees?
Yes.
Trustee Newbold and Trustee McDonald, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, great. So with that, okay, we'll move on to item number 6, which is to adopt the 2017-2018 elementary budget. And so, Pat, I know you had planned on doing a PowerPoint, but since we have trustees participating by telephone, I chatted with you, and we can make the PowerPoint available for all the public to see and the trustees to see who aren't here. So if you want to just hit the highlights of that presentation.
You bet. So thank you for being here. I'll leave the background section available for you to read. It identifies some of the modifications to the various funds, and jump right into page 27. Page 27 is a summary of our final budgets. These are our budgets that we need to adopt, or as trustees you need to adopt, along with their levy amounts. This is the motion to adopt. Page 33, I'm just skipping around, and page 33 is our budget projections, and we've gone through these a number of times, including just recently last week. I'll point out a couple changes. First, the general fund estimated projection of the final budget is $38,031,984. This is up $35,472 from last week when we talked, and this reflects some changes in state allocations of disproportionate costs. Maybe I'll mention also at this time, even though it's elementary, that the high school went up slightly for the same reason by about $18,984. Page 33, the increase in custodial staff, we had it at 20,000, it should be 29,000. And the increase in sub-custodial pay is new, that's 3,000 elementary, 2,500 high school. And then you'll see the interlocal support near the bottom. It was 60,587. It's 75,228. That means we're balanced in the high school, other than dealing with Senate Bill 261. And then the elementary, we're to the good, but that helps us address the Senate Bill 261 issues. Page 34 is the elementary general fund summary of revenue, and you'll note very significantly, House Bill 647 affected the funding of the base budget, and so if you look down about halfway, you'll see that the state block grants from last year to this year are zero, so that's a reduction of 1.3 million, and natural resource development payment went down almost 250,000. That burden is picked up by guaranteed tax-based aid, which is the state, but also by our local taxpayers in the form of a base permissive levy, and so in looking at that, just so you know, that means a change in what our budgets would otherwise look like, and I'll elaborate a little bit here in a second. So if you jump to page 30, I'll put up on the screen, only because I've added some information, some elements at the bottom, and significantly, you'll look under the general fund, if you'll see the total mill increase in the general fund of 7.55, it would actually be, based upon my estimated calculations, 1.88. If you look down there at the bottom, I'm showing what that would be if we funded similar to last year. And that's a difference of 5.67 mills. So essentially, we're through this legislation, we're pushing tax obligation or burden out to the local taxpayer that was part of the state funding. The impact tax-wise is $15.30 in the general fund. It would make that general fund increase $5 rather than $20, so it's significant. Then I'm just looking on page 30. This is a great sheet that shows the budgets, the levies, the increase in the levies, the increase in mills, the total mills, and the impact to a taxpayer at a $200,000 home. And you'll see there that the levy increase is 32.5 in total. Obviously, that would have been under 30 had the House Bill 647 not come into play. And then our tax impact in total of 87.75. Pages 31 is a graph of the mill levies in the elementary and how they've progressed since 2004. You'll see they're largely flat with a slight increase. This year it's a larger than normal increase, and a lot of that is explained through the debt service and the fact that we're issuing bonds in their entirety. With respect to the bonds and the debt service fund, back on page 30, that impact is 18.32 mills. That's by and large the largest increase in mills. The total mills are 52.33. Just for perspective, when we went to the voters in 2015, we provided information suggesting $144 per year impact on a homeowner. That's about 53.3 mills. We're showing 51.47, so this is early. We still issue these bonds in September, but we're looking to the good about 2 mills, which amounts to about 216,000 to the good. And then finally on page 32, this is the debt service mill levies, and notable here is the fact that we are zero since 2011, virtually since 2009, and then the bond issue is or the debt service reflects the bond issue here in 2017, 2018. That's anticipated based upon the voted bond election. So that's what I have on the elementary side.
Do any trustees have any questions for Pat? Trustee Smith?
I just real quick, I want to make sure that I'm understanding, Pat. So when you were talking about I think it was 2012 or whatever, the levies that we had estimated, was that for like the building reserve, or was that for?
The bond, sorry. So when we went out in 2015.
Oh, 15, when we went out, right. So,
yeah.
so what you're telling me and what we can tell the people is that our estimates at that point for the numbers that we put on the bond, we're coming in below those numbers.
That's correct, and it's really impressive that they are, because we factored in about $560,000 of state aid, which is also off the table. So state funding, we're kind of getting hit. Senate Bill 261, House Bill 647, and then the state aid for debt service also went off the table. So even without that, though, we're looking under what we had projected.
Well, that's good, and I'm sure a lot of that is interest and
Yes.
the speed and the quality of the work that we're getting done. I guess the only other thing that I always wanted to put out there is that we mentioned this at the meeting, a week ago Tuesday, and this is especially Senate Bill, what is it, 261, I think, is the one that's pushing the tax burden from the state, or decreasing the money that the state's giving us, pushing that tax burden onto our local taxpayers. And I just want to reiterate, this is happening all over the state. It's not something funky with Missoula. It's not something different that we're doing. It's the entire state. It's just a different way that they're not decreasing our taxes. They're just moving them from state fund to local.
That's correct. House Bill 647.
647.
Yep, so they peeled off general block grant dollars, and they peeled off natural resource development payment.
Right.
261 has the same effect because it just isn't reflected in a tax burden like it is here. But you're totally right, base budget, every district has to adopt it. It's funded partially by the state, partially locally. The part that is peeled off by the state gets plugged on, or a good chunk of it, on the local taxpayer.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Pat before I entertain a motion? Trustee Newbold or Trustee McDonald, any questions? Okay. Oh, trustee,
Can you remind us what happens next year with that increase or decrease resulting from the legislature's decisions?
Yeah, I'll try. It'll, yeah. And it'll come into effect again next year, under both pieces of legislation. The intent is to try and create a means of funding some facility support for Senate Bill 307. So they're trying to, under I keep forgetting, 647, House Bill 647, they anticipated, I think, that guaranteed tax base would pick up the bulk of the burden, and it didn't. The idea was to move revenue, I think, to support the facility support for districts. And then 261 had the same notions, but I don't have the full details in my head at this point in time. But I think that was the idea. It's going to have a fairly drastic impact statewide for these base levies. I don't think there's a district that cannot be affected by it.
With regard to House Bill, or Senate Bill 261, the impact in fiscal year 18 statewide is $6 million. The cumulative effect over the biennium, which would include fiscal year 19, would be $19.1 million of reduction.
any other questions of Pat or Superintendent Thane? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the adoption of all 2017-2018 elementary budgeted funds and the amounts to be raised by tax levies as are presented on the attached motion and resolution that begins on page 27. Is there a motion to do so from an elementary trustee? Moved by trustee Smith. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Kendall. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, I know we've covered these budgetary considerations for, I think this is the third or fourth meeting, so thank you for preparing us for tonight. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all elementary trustees who are in favor of approving the motion to adopt the 2017-2018 elementary budgeted funds and the amounts to be raised by tax levies as presented in the motion and resolution included as an attachment to our agenda, please indicate by saying yes, because we've got two folks by phone.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that is unanimous as to elementary trustees. Then we'll move on to item 7, which is to adopt the 2017-2018 secondary budget. And Pat, once again, this is information that has been presented on prior occasions as information-only items. If there's anything you want to point out about numbers that might have changed from the last presentation?
Yes, thank you. So page 35 on the high school budget adoption. Like elementary, this lists the final budgets along with the levy amount by fund. I have one requested modification under the retirement fund, which is presently $4,584,879. You'll see that on the fourth line. Retirement fund, Fund 14, page 35. If we could make that $4,433,784, so that's a reduction in the budget for the retirement fund. That would be one change. Within the packet, page 33, we talked about the projections in the elementary. I mentioned the one in the high school. It's an increase of about 19,000 of the overall adopted budget. And then on page, near the bottom, the increase in sub-custodial pay at 2,500. And then the interlocal support, finally, to help balance the budget, was also mentioned. That's a little higher at 75,000. Page 38, similar to the elementary, I would just point out, under the general fund, if I tried to recreate without House Bill 647 intact, we would look at a decrease in mills of 2.97 rather than an increase of 1.06. My calculations aren't perfect because there's some GTB multiplier increase that I can't peel out, but it gives a pretty good close. We also show the increased tax under the general fund of $2.87. whereas we should have seen a reduction of $8. That's a difference of about $11, if the funding had happened through the state. And again, that's my estimate there. This page is a great summary. Page 38 shows all the budgeted funds, their levies, total mills, increase in mills, increase in levies, and then tax impact. And then on the debt service side, I also look back in 2015, we were estimating about $72 per year on a $200,000 home. That's $26.67 in mills at today's tax value. We're projecting at about $22.36 mills. That's a difference of 4.3 mills, about over $800,000 annually. So that's for next year, a nice difference. Again, just an estimate, but that debt service is plugged in there. Page 31 is our mill levies without the debt service. This graph, it's really flat in the high school, and it's actually gone down since 2004, which is interesting. And then on the debt service side, we are virtually debt-free. Also, very flat, you'll see on page 32, and then the levies for the debt services, the bump there in 17 and 18. But otherwise, a pretty flat graph. That was all I had.
Any questions on the high school side from any trustees? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the adoption of the 2017-2018 secondary budgeted funds in the amounts to be raised by tax levies as are presented on the attached motion and resolution beginning, well, my pages are kind of goofy numbered, but I can't read them, but it's the last, second to last and third to last document in the packet. And so is there a motion by any trustee to approve the adoption of the secondary budgeted funds? Moved by trustee Bregstad. Is there a second? Second by trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Smith?
I just want to, I heard you say that you weren't exactly on, Pat, but we all appreciate the work that you and your entire staff, I know you've been working very hard to get us these numbers, and also appreciate the explanations that you give us. Thanks.
Holder, trustee McDonald?
No.
Okay. So there's a seconded motion. Is there any public comment? Whoops, is there any public comment on this topic? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the adoption of the 2017-2018 secondary budgeted funds and the amounts to be raised by tax levies as are presented in the attachments to the agenda for tonight's meeting, please indicate by saying yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Okay, and so if we have time, I'll make a suggestion, since it's pretty difficult to participate by telephone for information-only items, because that would mean I'd have to run these two little phones to every single person, and then run them back if someone's asking questions, and run them over if someone's answering the questions. But there are two items on the agenda that require action and would impact some students about to start school. So if there's no objection, if we can move to item 3B1, which is a request for exception to Board Policy 3110 for entrance placement and transfer. These are students who will, I believe, be 19 by the end of this.
By September 10th.
By September, so that it requires the trustees grant a waiver. And so the recommendation from the administration is that the trustees grant a waiver of age limitations for students identified as AC and LS. And Mrs. Robitaille, is there anything we need? Oh, or Mark's going to do it, okay.
Thank you, and I would just inform the trustees that we have occasional situations where students will turn 19 on or before September 10th of a school year, and they may not have yet met graduation requirements. This happens sometimes with students in special education who are working to complete IEP goals, and sometimes regular education students who might have late birthdays and maybe redshirted 1 year in school. At any rate, we have two requests this year, students who both have the capacity to complete graduation requirements in the coming school year, who have both expressed interest in continued attendance and will turn 19 prior to the cutoff date of September 10th. It's been our practice to recommend, based on administrative review, that these students be admitted per Board Policy 3110.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Thane? Okay, so I would entertain a motion, and are they elementary or
These two
secondary?
are secondary.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion from any trustee that the district grant a waiver of age limitations for the students identified as AC and LS. Moved by trustee Smith and seconded by trustee Kendall. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Brigstad?
I just want to reiterate what trustee Beers said last time this issue came up, and it's that Montana is the strictest state regarding this, and we're the only state where 19 is the cap, and that's something that I think the state legislature should fix.
Thanks. Is there any other trustee comment? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, then all trustees who are in favor of granting the waiver of age limitation for the students identified as AC and LS, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
And I'm saying yes, so that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to B2, which is to approve early admissions to kindergarten, and this is an elementary action item. There are a number of students, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, identified by initials and birth dates in the agenda, and the Montana State Office of Public Instruction requires board approval for all students requesting a waiver of age requirement to enroll in kindergarten. I believe our district has a fairly strict assessment tool to make sure that these students will be successful if they're allowed to enter kindergarten at a slightly earlier age. So the recommendation is that the trustees approve the age waiver for the students identified by initials and date of birth. And so is there any questions for Superintendent Thane?
I would just say that you'll note the birth dates of 3 of the students put them within 48 hours of the cutoff for admission to kindergarten. We often use this vehicle, though, to address students who may be identified as gifted or certainly accelerated learners, and to afford them the opportunity to initiate school at an earlier age. And as was referenced previously, there is an assessment process they complete, and the administration, based on building recommendations, would support early admission for these students. We also will not be able to collect A and B for these students unless they're approved by the Board of Trustees.
Any other questions for Superintendent Thane? Trustee Smith?
Just a quick question. I think I know the answer, but obviously when they're going through the process of evaluation for this program, I noticed that one of them's significantly later, just a few months, which probably isn't that significant for what we're talking about here. But is there a continuous evaluation, or do they? I want to make sure they don't get stuck.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And one of the conditions for early enrollment is that there's an evaluation in the first 6 weeks of school, and there is a determination at that point in time whether the student should continue in attendance or whether the recommendation would be that they wait a year.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions for Superintendent Thane? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the age waiver for the students who are identified in the agenda. Is there a motion from an elementary trustee? Moved by trustee Kendall. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Smith. Any board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, then all elementary trustees in favor of approving the age waiver for the students who are identified in our agenda, please indicate by saying yes.
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 And that is unanimous as to the elementary trustees. And then if we don't mind jumping around, there's 2 more action items that are not as pressing, but since we still haven't lost coverage, if we can move on to 3A1, it is to approve the grant application summary, which is partnering with NEA, the Carnegie Foundation, and the New Teacher Center to provide professional development and support to new teachers who are entering the field of education. And we've heard about this exciting partnership at several times, at several meetings, both from Melanie Charlson, from Hatton Littman, and I think Superintendent Thane. So I don't know if there's anything, Ms. Robitaille, you wanted to add to it, since your name's attached to it?
It's Elise.
Or Elise, oh, sorry, I'm totally jumping around. Dr. Guest, sorry.
I don't have anything in addition to add, just that this grant money would help fund some positions as well as some stipends and some significant professional development, not only for our new teachers, but teachers who are moving into tenure status as well. So it has some really long-term positive impact in instruction in our classrooms and student learning as a result.
Oh, thank you. See no questions, then is there a recommendation that we approve the grant application summary that's found on page 4? Moved by trustee Kendall. Is there a second? Second by trustee Bregstad. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Smith?
I just think it's great anytime that we can get money to help train our teachers. Anybody gives us money, I always, some of these I find rather humorous that we have to approve, that we can ask for money, but I think it's a great idea.
Any other questions from anybody? Seeing none, and we have a seconded motion, is that right, Elizabeth? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the grant application summary as attached on page 4, please indicate by saying yes. Yes. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, and that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And the last action item is C1, to approve the revenue and expenditure reports, which is found on page 5. It's the June 2017 revenue and expenditure reports. We see this type of report each month. Typically, it would be on the consent agenda, but since it was the only item that would be on the consent agenda, we just left it where it is. But there's nothing unusual about it other than the fact that because there was only one item on the consent agenda, it didn't make sense to pull it off. So any questions for Pat about information contained in the revenue and expenditure reports? Seeing no questions, then is there a motion to approve the attached revenue and expenditure reports? Moved by trustee Bregstad and seconded by trustee Smith. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the attached revenue and expenditure reports, please indicate by saying yes. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, and that's also approved unanimously. And if no one has an objection, I would ask perhaps if we table and continue to the next board meeting, probably the next one in September, 2, 3, 4, and 5 under C. These are reports which are very valuable, but I think the difficulty with people attending by telephone to appreciate the conversation is rather limited, and I'm sure we'll be able to have everybody back at that meeting. So is it okay to move those to the next meeting? Is that okay, trustee McDonald and trustee Newbold?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's unanimous, just to table it and to move it to the next meeting. And as always, we allow public comment on non-agenda items at the end of every meeting as well. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, so now we're adjourned, and thank you very much for being here under these interesting conditions, trustee.
Thank you.
Trustee Newbold. Thank you. And we'll hang up from you both. Thank you.
Bye.